What if humanity's greatest mysteries were carved into the earth itself? Massive designs etched across landscapes, visible only from heights ancient people couldn't reach. Or could they? The official explanation claims these are simple ceremonial grounds, primitive art created by ancient cultures. But the evidence tells a different story. These geoglyphs span continents. Some stretch for miles. Others contain mathematical precision that challenges our understanding of ancient capabilities. The calculations required shouldn't have been possible. The perspectives needed didn't exist. Yet there they are. Perfect, massive, unexplainable. Today we're examining 10 geoglyphs that defy conventional archaeology. Each one raises questions authorities would rather avoid. These aren't random drawings in the dirt. These are engineered designs requiring aerial perspective, advanced mathematics, and technology we're told didn't exist. Researchers who've questioned the official narrative faced ridicule. Funding disappeared. Publications refused their work. But the evidence remains carved into the earth, impossible to erase, impossible to explain. From South America to Central Asia, from the Middle East to North America, the pattern repeats across cultures that supposedly never made contact. Similar designs, similar scale, similar impossibility. What you're about to see challenges everything taught about human history, about ancient capabilities, about who might have helped create these monuments. Fair warning, this evidence contradicts accepted timelines. It suggests knowledge that shouldn't have existed. But the truth is always worth finding. 10 massive geoglyphs, 10 mysteries carved into earth, 10 cases where the official story crumbles under scrutiny. The designs are real. The questions remain unanswered. Let's examine what they're not telling you. Number 1 takes us to Peru. The Nazca lines stretch across 200 square miles of desert, created between 400 and 650 AD. Or so the official timeline claims. These aren't simple drawings. These are massive geoglyphs, visible only from the air. A spider spanning 150 feet. A hummingbird measuring 300 feet. A monkey covering 360 feet. Perfect proportions, precise geometry, flawless execution. Here's the problem. The Nazca people had no flying machines, no way to view their work from above. Yet every line is perfectly straight, every curve precisely calculated, every design proportionally accurate. Try drawing a straight line for 50 feet while walking. Now try it for a mile, across uneven terrain, without any way to see the big picture. Impossible without aerial perspective. The standard explanation suggests the Nazca used stakes and ropes, scaled up small drawings, maintained perfect proportions through ground-level coordination alone. But engineers have tried replicating this. Even with modern surveying equipment, maintaining accuracy across these distances proves nearly impossible. The mathematics required include precise angular calculations, understanding of large-scale geometry, knowledge of perspective that wouldn't be formalized for another 1,000 years. Dr. Maria Reichi spent 50 years studying the lines. A mathematician and archaeologist from Germany. She mapped them extensively, analyzed their construction, calculated what would be required. Her conclusion? The precision demanded knowledge the Nazca shouldn't have possessed. Her research included astronomical alignments. Many lines point to solstice positions. Others track planetary movements. This requires multi-generational observation, mathematical recording systems, predictive calculations. The Nazca supposedly had none of these. Then there's the preservation issue. These lines survived 1,500 years in one of Earth's driest deserts. But here's what doesn't add up. Ground disturbance should have erased them. Wind erosion, occasional rains, natural degradation. Yet they remain pristine, as if freshly made. Some researchers suggest the lines were created for aerial beings, gods who could fly, visitors who viewed from above. The evidence? Every design is visible only from the sky. None make sense from ground level. The official response? ceremonial pathways, astronomical calendars, religious expressions. But that doesn't explain the precision, or the aerial perspective requirement, or the mathematical sophistication. Documents from early Spanish explorers mention the lines. They describe them as roads to nowhere, but they also record local legends, stories of sky people, beings who flew, teachers who came from above. These accounts were dismissed as mythology, primitive explanations for ancient construction. Yet similar stories appear across unconnected cultures worldwide. Same themes, same descriptions, same aerial focus. The Nazca lines remain officially classified as ceremonial art, tourist attractions, ancient curiosities, but the engineering questions persist. The perspective problem remains unsolved. The mathematical impossibility stands unchallenged. What if the Nazca weren't the original creators? What if they maintained something built by others? That possibility threatens established archaeology, so it's ignored. But ignoring evidence doesn't make it disappear. Number 2 brings us to Kazakhstan. The steppe geoglyphs were discovered accidentally in 2007, spotted through satellite imagery. Massive earthworks covering northern Kazakhstan, over 200 designs mapped so far. But here's where things get strange. These formations date back 8,000 years. That's twice as old as the pyramids. The designs include perfect squares, precise circles, complex geometric patterns. One formation is a square with sides stretching 850 feet. Corner angles, perfect. Sides, perfectly straight. Another is a circle 400 feet in diameter, mathematically precise, evenly constructed. These were created during the Neolithic period, before advanced mathematics, before geometric principles were formalized. The people living there were supposedly nomadic hunters, simple tribes with basic tools. Yet they created designs requiring surveying knowledge, understanding of large-scale geometry, coordination across massive distances. The construction method involved moving thousands of tons of earth, creating raised mounds, forming perfectly geometric shapes. This isn't casual art. This is engineered construction. Dr. Dmitry Day from Kostanay University led initial investigations. His team mapped the formations extensively. What they found challenged everything known about that era. The geometric precision matches modern surveying standards. The mathematical ratios align with advanced principles. The Bronze Age nomads supposedly responsible couldn't read or write, had no recorded mathematical systems, left no evidence of advanced knowledge. Yet these formations demonstrate both. Then there's the visibility problem again. These shapes are only recognizable from high altitude. Ground level reveals nothing but scattered mounds. The patterns emerge only from above. How did Neolithic people know what they were creating? How did they maintain accuracy without aerial verification? The official explanation suggests religious significance, tribal gathering places, ceremonial grounds. But that doesn't address the precision, or the mathematical sophistication, or the aerial perspective requirement. Some formations align with astronomical events, solstice markers, equinox indicators. This requires generations of celestial observation, recording systems, predictive capabilities, none of which existed in that time period. According to accepted history, Russian researchers published findings in 2015. The paper detailed the mathematical impossibilities. It was largely ignored by mainstream archaeology, too disruptive to established timelines. The response? These were simply more sophisticated than previously thought. End of discussion. But sophistication doesn't explain aerial perspective. It doesn't resolve the mathematical contradiction. Local legends speak of sky observers, beings who taught from above, knowledge granted by those who flew, dismissed as mythology, retroactive explanations for unexplained construction. Yet the pattern repeats. Ancient sites, aerial perspective requirements, stories of sky teachers. The Kazakhstan formations remain officially classified as religious architecture, tribal expressions of faith. The engineering questions go unanswered. The timeline contradictions ignored. The evidence sits in satellite imagery for anyone to examine. But examining it means questioning established narratives. That's professionally dangerous for archaeologists. So the mystery remains buried under bureaucratic dismissal. Number 3 takes us to Jordan. The desert wheels of the Middle East span from Syria to Saudi Arabia. Thousands of stone formations. Circular patterns made from piled rocks. Some exceed 400 feet in diameter. They're called wheels because of their spoke-like designs, lines radiating from central hubs. These formations date back 9,000 years, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids. Created during a time when humans supposedly lived in simple camps, basic survival, primitive tools. Yet these structures required massive labor, organized planning, coordinated construction, and again, they're only visible from the air. Ground level shows scattered rock piles. The patterns emerge only from altitude. Dr. David Kennedy from the University of Western Australia documented over 400 of these formations using satellite imagery and aerial photography. His findings revealed something unexpected. The precision wasn't accidental. Many wheels align with astronomical events. Others point to specific geographic features. Some form larger patterns across hundreds of miles. This suggests a network, a system, coordinated design spanning enormous distances. The labor required is staggering, moving thousands of tons of stone, arranging them in precise patterns. The official explanation? Burial markers, territorial boundaries, tribal symbols. But that doesn't explain the scale, or the precision, or the networked coordination. Some wheels connect through sight lines, stand at one, others become visible across the landscape. This requires surveying knowledge, understanding of geographic positioning, planning across vast distances. Not exactly what we'd expect from Stone Age nomads. Then there's the preservation mystery. 9,000 years of weathering, yet the formations remain distinct, as if someone maintained them, repaired them, kept them functional. But for what purpose? Carbon dating confirms the age. Archaeological evidence supports the timeline. The stones are definitely ancient, but the design sophistication contradicts the era. The precision challenges accepted capabilities. Researchers who suggested advanced planning faced pushback. Funding dried up. Publications refused their papers. The safer route? Stick with ceremonial explanations. Avoid controversial implications. Local Bedouin tribes have stories, legends of sky people, beings who descended and taught, knowledge from above. The formations are called works of the old men, but descriptions suggest teachers, instructors, advanced beings. These stories were collected by researchers in the 1920s, dismissed as folklore, yet they describe exactly what the evidence shows: aerial perspective, advanced planning, coordinated construction. The Jordan wheels connect to similar formations across the region. Syria, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. Same design principles, same scale, same impossibility. The pattern suggests a larger system, a network spanning thousands of miles. But acknowledging that means rewriting history, admitting ancient cultures possessed knowledge they shouldn't have. The wheels remain classified as primitive architecture. Interesting curiosities. Ancient mysteries. The engineering questions persist. The aerial perspective problem remains. The coordination mystery stands unanswered. What if these weren't created by the people who lived there? What if they maintained something built by others? That question threatens too much. So it's not asked officially, but the wheels remain. Visible from satellites. Undeniable. Unexplained. Number 4 brings us to Chile. The Atacama Giant stretches across a mountainside in northern Chile, created between 1000 and 1400 AD. This humanoid figure measures 390 feet tall, the largest anthropomorphic geoglyph in the world. But size isn't the most interesting part. The figure features geometric patterns, square head, precise lines, angular limbs. This isn't naturalistic art. This is technical design. The construction required removing dark surface rocks, revealing lighter soil beneath, creating contrast visible for miles, but only from the air. Ground level shows nothing coherent. The figure emerges only from altitude. The Tiwanaku people supposedly created this, an advanced civilization for the region. Yet they had no written language, no recorded mathematical systems, no flying machines. Still, they carved a perfect humanoid, 390 feet tall, on a mountainside, with geometric precision. The head is square, exactly square, not approximately, not roughly, mathematically square. The limbs extend at precise angles. The proportions align with geometric ratios. This requires planning, calculation, verification from above. Dr. Luis Briones studied Atacama's geoglyphs for 4 decades, a Chilean archaeologist specializing in these formations. His analysis revealed something unexpected. The figure aligns with the December solstice. On that date, the sun sets directly above the giant's head, creating a crown of light. This alignment requires astronomical knowledge, multi-year observation, predictive calculations, and it means the builders knew exactly where to place the figure, accounting for terrain, calculating angles, planning for celestial events. That's not primitive art. That's astronomical engineering. The official explanation suggests religious significance, a deity representation, ceremonial purpose. But that doesn't address the precision, the astronomical alignment, the geometric sophistication. Local legends describe the figure as a sky watcher, a being who observed from above, a teacher who came from the stars. These stories were recorded by Spanish missionaries, dismissed as native mythology, yet they match the physical evidence: aerial perspective, astronomical alignment, advanced knowledge. The figure includes rays extending from the head, 11 lines radiating outward. Some researchers suggest these represent specific stars, or planetary positions, or celestial coordinates. If true, this indicates advanced astronomical knowledge, recording systems, mathematical capabilities, none officially attributed to the Tiwanaku culture. The Atacama giant sits in one of Earth's driest deserts. Rainfall measures less than half an inch annually. This preserved the figure, but it also raises questions. Why create something in such isolation? Why place it where few could see it from ground level? Unless it wasn't meant for ground observers. Similar geometric geoglyphs appear across South America. Same precision, same aerial requirements, same astronomical alignments. The pattern suggests shared knowledge, connected cultures, or a common teacher. But mainstream archaeology treats each site as isolated, unconnected, independently developed. That avoids uncomfortable questions about how separate cultures developed identical, sophisticated techniques. The Atacama giant remains officially classified as religious art, an impressive but primitive expression of faith. The geometric precision gets downplayed, the astronomical alignment dismissed as coincidence, the aerial perspective problem ignored. What if this figure wasn't art? What if it was a marker, a beacon, a message meant for aerial observation? That possibility stays buried under official disinterest. Number 5 takes us to England. The Uffington White Horse cuts across a hillside in Oxfordshire, created around 3,000 years ago. This isn't a realistic horse. This is a stylized geometric design. The figure stretches 370 feet long, created by digging trenches and filling them with crushed white chalk. But here's the interesting part. The perspective is wrong for ground viewers. From the hillside, the horse looks distorted, stretched, disproportionate. Only from the air does it look correct. The proportions align. The design makes sense. This requires understanding of perspective distortion, knowledge of how altitude affects visual perception. The Bronze Age Britons supposedly responsible had none of that knowledge, according to accepted history. Yet they created a figure that only looks right from the sky. The design uses flowing curves, geometric precision, mathematical ratios. Dr. David Miles led archaeological investigations in the 1990s. Oxford University archaeologist. His team used optical stimulated luminescence dating, confirmed the 3,000-year age, but they also analyzed the construction mathematics, the perspective calculations, the geometric principles. The sophistication shocked researchers. This wasn't trial and error. This was planned engineering. The horse requires maintenance. Every generation, locals gather to re-chalk the trenches. This tradition continued for 3,000 years, unbroken, despite invasions, migrations, cultural changes. Why maintain a figure you can't properly see from ground level? Unless the purpose wasn't ground observation? The horse sits near ancient burial mounds and an Iron Age hill fort and other prehistoric structures. Some researchers suggest this area served as a ceremonial complex. Others propose astronomical purposes. But none explain the aerial perspective requirement. Local legends describe the horse as a dragon, a sky serpent, a flying being that descended to this location. These stories predate written records, passed through oral tradition for millennia. They describe the figure as a marker for sky travelers, a beacon for those who fly, dismissed as folklore, imaginative explanations for ancient construction. But they match the physical evidence, a design requiring aerial viewing, mathematical precision, perspective knowledge. The Uffington horse connects to other white horse figures across England. Similar designs, similar aerial requirements. But this one is oldest, most geometrically precise, most mathematically sophisticated. The chalk trenches run 3 feet deep, perfectly maintained, precisely carved. This represents thousands of hours of labor, organized planning, coordinated effort. For a figure you can't see properly from where you're standing, the official explanation suggests tribal identity, regional symbol, religious expression. Standard answers that avoid uncomfortable questions. What if Bronze Age Britons didn't create this? What if they maintained it? What if the design came from those who could view it properly? From the air? That question threatens accepted timelines, challenges established narratives, so it remains unasked in official circles. But the horse remains carved into the hillside, visible from aircraft, perfect in proportion when viewed from above. 3,000 years of maintenance for a perspective that shouldn't have existed. The evidence speaks for itself, even when archaeology won't. Number 6 brings us to Australia. The Merry Man appeared in 1998, discovered by a pilot flying over South Australia. This geoglyph depicts an indigenous Australian hunter throwing stick in hand. The figure measures 2.7 miles tall. That's 4.2 kilometers. The largest geoglyph ever discovered, visible from space. But nobody knows who created it, or how, or why. The figure appeared overnight, on restricted land, in complete secrecy. The construction required heavy machinery, precise surveying, coordinated planning. Someone moved thousands of tons of earth, created trenches 30 feet wide, carved a figure spanning miles, all without being detected. In one of Australia's most remote regions, the precision is remarkable, the proportions perfect, the perspective correct only from high altitude. This wasn't vandalism, this was engineered construction. Initial investigations found tire tracks, evidence of bulldozers, surveying equipment marks, but no witnesses, no documentation, no claims of responsibility. The Australian government launched inquiries. The land belonged to pastoral leases. Someone trespassed with heavy equipment. Yet nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. No one came forward. An anonymous fax arrived at local media. It included coordinates, a vague reference to an American artist. But the artist denied involvement. The lead went nowhere. Whoever created this had resources, planning, technical expertise, and a reason to stay hidden. The figure required aerial perspective to design, surveying equipment to execute, verification from aircraft to complete. This isn't amateur work. This is professional engineering. Dr. Philip Clark, an anthropologist, analyzed the cultural implications. The figure resembles traditional indigenous art styles, but scaled to impossible dimensions, with precision requiring modern technology. Local indigenous communities expressed surprise. Some called it sacred, others found it disrespectful. None claimed knowledge of its creation. The Merryman raised questions about land use, privacy, security. If someone could create a miles-long geoglyph undetected, what else was possible? Government agencies investigated for years, found nothing conclusive. The figure began eroding. Natural weathering, desert conditions. By 2010, it had largely faded, but during its existence, it proved something important. Modern humans can create massive geoglyphs requiring aerial perspective. With planning, resources, and secrecy, it's possible. So why assume ancient peoples couldn't, especially with help? The Merryman demonstrates that geoglyph creation requires technology, modern equipment, aerial verification. Yet we attribute ancient geoglyphs to primitive cultures. With none of these resources, the contradiction is obvious. Some researchers suggested the Merryman was a demonstration, proof that ancient geoglyphs required advanced assistance. Others saw it as art, an experiment, a mystery for its own sake. But it revealed something crucial. These formations don't happen naturally. They require planning, technology, and aerial perspective, which means ancient creators needed the same things. One way or another, the official position remains unchanged. Ancient geoglyphs were ceremonial, primitive art, cultural expressions. The Merryman proved that's unlikely, but that evidence gets compartmentalized. Modern geoglyph? Technology required. Ancient geoglyph? Primitive methods. The double standard is glaring. What if ancient builders had help? Access to aerial perspective? Guidance from those who could fly? That possibility explains the evidence. But it disrupts established history, so it stays buried under professional reluctance. The Merryman has mostly faded, but the questions it raised remain carved into the landscape of archaeological debate. Number 7 takes us to the American Southwest. The Blythe intaglios rest along the Colorado River in California. Discovered in 1932 by a pilot. 6 figures carved into the desert floor. The largest measures 171 feet long. Created by the Mojave or Quechan peoples, dating back somewhere between 450 and 2,000 years. The figures depict humans and animals, carved by scraping away dark surface rocks, revealing lighter soil beneath. But like all other geoglyphs, they're only visible from the air. Ground level shows nothing coherent. The Mojave Desert people supposedly created these without flying machines, without surveying equipment, without any way to verify their work. Yet the proportions are perfect, the perspective's correct, the design's precise. One figure resembles a human with arms outstretched. Another appears to be a 4-legged animal, possibly a horse or mountain lion. Wait, a horse? Horses went extinct in North America over 10,000 years ago. They weren't reintroduced until Spanish colonization in the 1500s. If these geoglyphs date to before European contact, how would indigenous peoples know what a horse looked like? Unless the dating is wrong, or the animal identification is wrong, or something else is missing from the official explanation. The Native American tribes in the region have oral traditions. They describe these figures as sacred, created by the ancestors under guidance from sky beings. Stories speak of teachers who descended, beings who showed how to mark the earth, knowledge from those who flew. Early anthropologists documented these accounts in the 1930s, then dismissed them as mythology. Standard procedure when legends contradict accepted history. The Blythe intaglios were nearly destroyed multiple times. Military exercises, off-road vehicles, development projects. Only intervention by archaeologists and Native American groups saved them. They're now protected, fenced off, preserved as historical sites, but the questions about their creation remain unanswered. Dr. J. von Werlhoff spent decades studying desert geoglyphs, California archaeologists specializing in these formations. His surveys revealed hundreds of similar figures across the Southwest, Same construction methods. Same aerial perspective requirements. Same impossibility. The mathematical precision required to create proportional figures at this scale exceeds what Stone Age peoples supposedly possessed. Yet here they are. Undeniable. Unexplainable through conventional means. The official narrative suggests ceremonial pathways, religious significance, tribal identity markers, but none of that addresses the aerial perspective problem. The precision, the coordination. Some figures align with astronomical events, solstice markers, equinox indicators. Others point to geographic features, mountains, river bends, specific locations. This suggests planning beyond religious ceremony, purpose beyond tribal art. The Blythe intaglios connect to a larger pattern, desert geoglyphs across North America. Similar designs, similar scale, similar questions, but mainstream archaeology treats each site independently, avoiding implications of connected knowledge, shared techniques, common origins. That would require explaining how isolated tribes developed identical, sophisticated methods, without contact, without written records, without technology. The simpler explanation? They had help, guidance, knowledge from elsewhere. But that explanation threatens too much. So it's not considered officially. The Blythe intaglios remain classified as Native American ceremonial art. Interesting, but primitive. Ancient, but explainable. The aerial perspective requirement gets minimized, the precision downplayed, the impossibility ignored. What if these figures weren't created by those who lived there? What if they marked something, indicated something to aerial observers? Those questions stay buried under bureaucratic certainty, but the figures remain carved into the desert, visible from aircraft, perfect in execution, impossible to explain. Number 8 takes us to Russia. The Ural Mountains harbor geoglyphs, discovered through satellite imagery in 2011, near Zlatoust, in the Chelyabinsk region. A massive elk or moose figure, along with geometric shapes, stone arrangements, ritual platforms. The elk measures about 275 meters from antler tip to hoof. That's roughly 900 feet. Created during the Neolithic or Chalcolithic period, 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. That's Bronze Age technology. Stone tools, no written language, basic tribal organization. Yet someone organized massive construction projects, created designs visible only from altitude, maintained geometric precision. The elk was made using rows of stones, carefully placed, forming the outline of the animal. Thousands of individual rocks, each positioned precisely, creating a figure recognizable only from the sky. Russian archaeologist Stanislav Grigoriev led initial surveys. His team used aerial photography and ground studies. What they found challenged expectations. The construction showed planning, engineering knowledge, coordinated labor. Not exactly what you'd expect from scattered Bronze Age communities. The figure sits on a raised area, chosen specifically for visibility from altitude, not from ground level. Why construct something on a hill where you still can't see it properly unless you're flying? The elk connects to shamanic traditions in the region, ancient beliefs about sky journeys, spirit flight, connections between earth and sky. But those are later cultural interpretations. The physical evidence predates those traditions. So which came first? The beliefs about sky travel? Or the structures requiring aerial perspective? That question doesn't get asked officially. The geometric shapes near the elk include precise circles, square formations, aligned stones. These suggest astronomical purposes, celestial tracking, seasonal markers. But implementing that requires mathematical knowledge, multi-generational observation, recording systems. Bronze Age Ural peoples supposedly lacked all of these. Yet the evidence sits in satellite imagery. Undeniable, precisely constructed, impossibly sophisticated. The Russian government hasn't prioritized these sites. Limited funding, minimal investigation, basic documentation, which means most research comes from independent archaeologists, academic outsiders, researchers operating on limited budgets. That's convenient for maintaining official narratives. If nobody investigates thoroughly, uncomfortable questions don't arise. The Ural geoglyphs connect to similar formations across Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Siberia. Same design principles, same aerial requirements, same timeline inconsistencies. The pattern suggests a larger network, connected knowledge, shared techniques. But acknowledging that means rewriting regional history, admitting ancient peoples possessed capabilities we don't understand. The elk figure has degraded significantly. Natural erosion, human activity, agricultural expansion. Unlike the Nazca lines protected by desert conditions, these formations face harsher environments, which means evidence disappears. Questions go unanswered. Mysteries fade into uncertainty. That serves certain interests. Missing evidence can't contradict official explanations. Local Siberian and Uralic peoples have stories, legends of sky shamans, beings who flew between worlds, teachers who descended. These traditions were documented by Russian ethnographers in the 19th century, then classified as primitive beliefs. But they describe exactly what the evidence shows: aerial perspective, advanced planning, knowledge from above. The Ural geoglyphs remain largely unknown internationally. No major media coverage, minimal academic attention. That's not accidental. Obscurity prevents scrutiny. Limited investigation means limited challenges to accepted history. What if Bronze Age peoples weren't primitive? What if they had access to knowledge we don't account for? What if they were taught, guided, given plans by those who could verify from the sky? Those possibilities stay buried under funding limitations and professional caution. But the elk remains, visible in satellite imagery, testimony to capabilities that shouldn't have existed. Number 9 brings us to Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Arabian gates number in the thousands. Stone structures scattered across volcanic fields. These aren't geoglyphs carved into earth. These are constructed formations, built from local stone. They're called gates because they resemble field entrances. Stone walls, forming rectangular shapes, with openings on one side. But they don't enclose anything. They don't serve as barriers. They don't protect or contain. They just exist. Visible from above, purposeless, from ground level. Carbon dating places them at 9,000 years old. Neolithic period, before agriculture, before permanent settlements. Yet someone organized construction projects across hundreds of square miles, moving thousands of tons of stone. The gates range from 40 feet to over 1,500 feet long. The larger ones required massive labor, coordinated teams, organized planning, sustained effort. For structures with no apparent ground-level function, Dr. David Kennedy rediscovered these formations using satellite imagery. Same researcher who documented the Jordan Wheels. His surveys revealed over 400 gate structures. Precise construction, deliberate placement. Many gates align with each other, creating sightlines across vast distances, forming larger patterns. This requires surveying knowledge, geographic awareness, coordinated design, not exactly Stone Age capabilities. The volcanic fields where these gates sit are called harat, black basalt rock covering the landscape. The gates use this local stone, but arranged in specific patterns, constructed with purpose. Some researchers suggested they were animal traps, corralling wildlife for hunting. But that doesn't work. The walls are too low, the openings too wide, the placement too spread out. Others proposed ritual significance, ceremonial boundaries, territorial markers. But that doesn't explain the scale, or the coordination, or the networked alignment. The gates connect to kites, another type of ancient structure in the region. Stone walls, funneling animals into killing zones. Those make practical sense. These gates don't, unless they weren't meant for ground-level function, unless their purpose was aerial. The patterns they create are visible from high altitude. They form geometric designs across the landscape, rectangles, triangles, complex arrangements. What if these weren't gates? What if they were markers, indicators for aerial navigation? That would explain the networked placement, the sightline alignments, the altitude-dependent visibility. But it requires accepting that 9,000 years ago, someone had aerial perspective, one way or another. Local Bedouin tribes have limited knowledge of these structures. They're called the works of the old men, ancient construction by forgotten peoples. But no detailed legends, no creation stories, no cultural memory. That's unusual. Most ancient structures carry oral traditions, stories passed through generations. The absence of stories suggests these predate cultural memory. They're older than the oldest traditions, or they're maintained remnants of something nobody wants to remember. The Saudi government restricts access to these sites. Remote locations, harsh environments, limited infrastructure, but also intentional barriers. Research permits difficult to obtain. Foreign archaeologists face obstacles. That limits investigation, which limits questions, which preserves official narratives. What little research exists comes from satellite analysis, aerial photography, remote sensing. Ground investigation remains minimal, which means mysteries stay mysterious. The gates represent organized construction at a scale we don't associate with that era, planning and coordination beyond accepted capabilities. Yet there they sit, thousands of them, undeniable, unexplainable. The pattern repeats across the region. Middle Eastern geoglyphs, stone formations, structures requiring aerial perspective, all from periods before flying machines, before surveying technology, before mathematical systems, but all demonstrating those capabilities. The contradiction is clear, the evidence undeniable, the implications ignored. What if Neolithic peoples weren't working alone? What if they had guidance, help from those who could see from above? That question threatens established timelines, so it remains professionally dangerous. The Saudi gates stand as testimony to construction beyond accepted history, to knowledge we don't acknowledge. Number 10 takes us back to Peru, but not to Nazca. The Palpa lines sit near the Nazca lines, created by different cultures, different time periods, but same impossibility. These geoglyphs include human figures called anthropomorphs, stylized people with elaborate headdresses. But here's what makes them special. They're on hillsides, not flat ground. Creating proportional figures on sloped terrain requires advanced mathematics, perspective calculations, compensation for distortion. Try drawing a circle on a hillside, keeping it proportional from aerial view, accounting for terrain irregularity. Now make that circle 200 feet wide, using only stones and ropes. The mathematics required exceed what pre-Columbian cultures supposedly possessed. Yet the Palpa anthropomorphs are perfectly proportional when viewed from above. Despite being on irregular slopes, Dr. Marcus Reindl from the German Archaeological Institute studied these formations extensively. His analysis revealed sophisticated planning. The figures were designed from aerial perspective, then translated to ground construction, accounting for terrain. That's reverse engineering. Starting with the desired aerial view, working backward to ground execution. This requires understanding of perspective geometry, projection mathematics, three-dimensional visualization. Bronze Age Peruvian cultures had none of these formally. No written mathematics, no geometric texts, no preserved calculations. Yet they executed these designs flawlessly. The Palpa lines include other elements, geometric shapes, straight lines, animal figures, all requiring aerial verification, all impossible to properly see from ground level. One line runs perfectly straight for over 3 miles, across valleys, over hills, through terrain changes. Maintaining straightness across that distance requires surveying equipment or aerial verification, preferably both. Neither supposedly existed. Carbon dating places these around 400 to 600 AD, same period as Nazca lines. Similar techniques, similar impossibility, but different cultures created them. That suggests shared knowledge, connected technology, common source of information. Mainstream archaeology treats them as independent developments, parallel evolution of similar techniques. But that strains credibility. Two unconnected cultures developing identical, impossible methods? The simpler explanation: they learned from the same source, received guidance from the same teachers. But that source would need aerial capability, one way or another. The Palpa region includes other mysteries: underground aqueducts displaying advanced engineering, ceramic remains showing sophisticated artistry. These cultures weren't primitive, but they supposedly lacked knowledge these geoglyphs require. The contradiction persists across all these sites: advanced construction, aerial perspective requirements, mathematical precision, all from cultures officially lacking these capabilities. At what point does the pattern become undeniable? How many impossible structures before we question the timeline? The Palpa lines, like the Nazca lines, have suffered damage: tourism, weather, natural erosion, but they're still visible, still precisely proportioned, still impossible to explain conventionally. Peruvian researchers face challenges investigating these sites: limited funding, political obstacles, professional risks. Questioning established narratives threatens careers. Proposing alternative explanations invites ridicule. So most researchers stick to safe interpretations: ceremonial purposes, religious art, cultural expressions. The engineering questions go unasked, the mathematical impossibilities unaddressed, the aerial perspective requirement ignored. What if all these geoglyphs worldwide were created with help, guidance from those with aerial capability? What if ancient peoples were taught, given plans, shown techniques by beings who could fly? That explanation fits all the evidence, explains all the impossibilities, resolves all the contradictions, but it requires accepting something uncomfortable. We're not the first advanced civilization. We're not the first with technology. Or at least, we're not the first to interact with advanced beings. That possibility threatens fundamental assumptions about history, about human development, about our place in the universe. So it stays buried, dismissed, professionally dangerous. But the geoglyphs remain, carved into earth, built from stone, testimony to knowledge that shouldn't exist. 10 cases examined, 10 impossibilities documented, 10 challenges to accepted history. The pattern is clear, the evidence undeniable, the implications profound. 10 massive geoglyphs, spanning 5 continents, crossing thousands of years, all sharing impossible characteristics: aerial perspective requirements, mathematical precision, engineering sophistication, coordinated construction, all from cultures supposedly lacking these capabilities. The Nazca lines with their perfect geometry, the Kazakhstan formations with their Neolithic impossibility, the Jordan wheels with their networked precision. Each one challenges accepted history. Each one raises uncomfortable questions. Questions about who taught ancient peoples, about where knowledge came from, about what we're not being told. The official explanations are consistent: ceremonial art, religious expression, tribal identity, safe answers that avoid deeper inquiry. But those answers don't address the evidence. The aerial perspective problem persists. The mathematical contradictions remain. These structures required technology, planning, verification from altitude. One way or another, ancient builders had access to aerial perspective. The Merryman proved modern humans need technology for this: equipment, coordination, resources. Yet we attribute ancient versions to primitive methods: ropes and stakes, trial and error, lucky accidents. The double standard is obvious. Cultures worldwide, separated by oceans, divided by millennia, all developing identical, impossible techniques. Either that's the most unlikely coincidence in history, or they shared a common source of knowledge. The legends are consistent too: stories of sky people, teachers who descended, beings who flew, dismissed as mythology, primitive explanations for unexplained construction. But they match the physical evidence perfectly: aerial perspective, advanced knowledge, guidance from above. At what point does the pattern become undeniable? These geoglyphs weren't created for ground viewers. They were designed for aerial observation. That's not speculation. That's documented fact. They only make sense from altitude. So who were ancient peoples creating them for? Who was meant to see them? Those questions don't get asked officially, because the answers threaten too much. Threatened established timelines, challenge accepted capabilities, suggest we're not alone. Never were. The evidence sits in deserts, on mountainsides, across plains, visible in satellite imagery, carved into earth, built from stone. Testimony to knowledge we don't acknowledge. Researchers who ask too many questions face consequences. Funding disappears. Publications refuse their work. Careers end. The professional price for challenging established narratives is steep, so most stay silent. Stick to safe interpretations. Avoid controversial implications. But silence doesn't change evidence. Avoiding questions doesn't resolve contradictions. These geoglyphs exist. Their precision is measurable. Their aerial requirements undeniable. The mathematics they required is documented. The engineering they demanded is clear. Ancient peoples either possessed capabilities we don't acknowledge, or they had help we don't admit. Either answer rewrites history. Either possibility challenges fundamental assumptions. The choice isn't whether to accept mystery. The choice is which mystery to accept. Impossibly advanced ancient civilizations, or ancient contact with aerial beings. Pick your uncomfortable truth. The geoglyphs will outlast our denial. They've survived thousands of years. They'll survive our reluctance to face evidence. Eventually, the questions become unavoidable, the pattern too clear, the implications too obvious. What if humanity's history is different than we've been taught? What if ancient peoples knew more than we admit? What if we've never been alone? The evidence has been carved into earth, built across continents, preserved for millennia. 10 cases examined, 10 impossibilities documented, 10 testimonies to hidden truth. The geoglyphs speak for themselves. Even when official history stays silent, look up, question everything. The truth is written across the landscape for those willing to see it.